Hello, and welcome to our podcast, Arizona Opera Behind the Scenes. I'm Cassie Robel, the Director of Education and Community Engagement.
And I'm Kathleen Trott, the shop manager for the Marlu, Allan, and Scott Stallard Costume Artisan Workshop. Thank you all for joining us today. In this podcast series, we're going to introduce you to all the departments and people that are necessary to produce the operas you enjoy.
In this episode, we'll be joined by Alanna Maniscalco, Props Supervisor at Arizona Opera.
Before we start, let's review our trivia from last episode. What did ancient Romans use to treat freckles? And the answer is ashes from snails. Queen Elizabeth thought lipstick brought on evil spirits. True or false? It's false. She actually thought that it got rid of evil spirits. In fact, she died with nearly a half of an inch of lip rouge on.
We are so excited to welcome Alanna on our podcast today. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, I'm excited.
All right, Alanna. So let's dive right in. Can you explain to us what exactly a props supervisor is for all of our listeners who don't know?
Props Supervisor is responsible for acquiring everything a performer interacts with, in addition to everything that creates the environment on the stage. They coordinate with the designer and the director. They also budget and oftentimes manage a crew of props artisans.
So that's going to be everything from a lipstick tube all the way up to a table, right?
Yep.
That's a lot of different kinds of things that one person has to sort of...
A large variety. Lots of research involved.
As prop supervisor, is it more acquiring props or do you build props as well?
It really depends on the production. Usually, I'd say it's split. If it's super specific, if a designer designs something on paper and it doesn't exist in the world, then you have to make it from scratch. If it's something that's easily enough to buy, then you can do that and then maybe modify it from there.
So before we get too much into what exactly you do here at Arizona Opera, I would love to ask you a little bit about yourself and what sort of education do you have that led you to becoming a props supervisor?
I have a general theater degree from State University of New York College at Oneonta, also known as SUNY Oneonta, with a computer art minor. So since I got a general theater degree, I got to take classes in makeup, in costumes, in just general classes, and stage management. I like a lighting class, so I got to take classes in pretty much every department except for props.
What?
They didn't have a props class while I was there. I think they got one the year after I graduated.
So what led,
which is
if you
wild,
didn't, that's hilarious that you are a props supervisor and didn't take any props classes. So what led you to props?
I don't know that but it started, I guess, in high school. My senior year, I asked the director, hey, what can I do for our musical? And he said, why don't you be the props master? I was like, okay. And then I figured out what that meant and what that was. And I was like tracking props without even know that tracking props was a thing to do or what it was called. But in college, I took on, I had to do kind of like a practicum credits. And so I did like one of them was reupholstering a chair. So I got to do crafty things while I was in college. That kind of was, focused more towards props. Yeah.
How long have you been with Arizona Opera?
I think it's 4 years now. I got here September 2016.
So then where were you before you came to Arizona Opera?
I was taking contract work, working like 3 or 4 months at a time at different theaters across the country. And I was looking to settle down finally. I enjoyed bouncing around and seeing the different cities and even going back to different cities each year. But I was looking for a home base, and it all kind of worked out great.
That I think happens a lot with us here, that it all just sort of somehow clicks properly.
I agree. For those of you who don't know, Alanna, can you explain what you mean? Most of us know what freelancing means, but what does that mean in the term of artist? So are you traveling from summer festival and then you have a job all season? How were you freelancing?
For me, let's see if I can remember. I was taking, I would go to Florida for the winter time, sign a contract with them. I'm going to start this date and this date.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah, it was ideal. It was really nice. Then I would have to line up before that contract ended where I was going to be after that. So oftentimes, I forget the whole schedule of where I went when, but in the springtime, it would be in St. Louis, and I went to upstate New York for the summertime. So I would oftentimes go back to the same companies because it usually worked out in the schedule, but almost every year there would be one that was different and kind of messed up everything else. But
that sounds so hard to just travel from space to space to space.
A lot of us production folks at the beginning of our career were nomadic in some way. It just sort of is the nature of the industry that we all have done our time flitting from country or from city to city, if not even from country to country. So where were you from before then? What part of the country are you originally from, since you were all over the place working?
I am originally from upstate, and I'm going to say that in quotes, New York. I like to call it mid-state. It's 2 hours north of New York City, 1 hour south of Albany. Hudson Valley. I love it there. The mountains are beautiful.
I definitely agree. I was born and raised in New Jersey. My sister lives in upstate New York. So, it's beautiful up there. But I will admit that I am now a desert flower and don't know that I could leave Arizona because the weather is perfect. So now that we know a little bit about you, let's get into what you do for us at Arizona Opera. So what is the difference between a prop and a set piece? You mentioned before that you're setting the stage, but we obviously have, we talked to Matt and Ryan earlier in this series about their job here as carpenters and technical directors. So what makes you different from what they are doing?
I like to say that the props are everything but the walls and the floor. All of the other stuff, anything that goes on a wall, picture frame, a rug, furniture, cups, everything else. Yeah.
Anything that could be moved by a performer in a manipulate it on stage sort of way.
So we know the difference between a prop and a set piece. So everything but the walls, theoretically. So then what's the difference between a costume prop and a prop? And Kathleen, I don't know if you want to explain what a costume prop is.
So I think that the difference between a costume prop and a prop for me often, and I think I've had this conversation with Alanna before, is who cares more about it is the actual answer. So a purse could be a prop or it could be a costume prop. If the designer wants it to match the outfit, then it lives in my land often. If nobody has ever mentioned it and it just is in passing and it doesn't have to match anything, then often it lands over in Elena's land. But then there are things where you're like, okay, so a satchel, what's a satchel? Elena and I literally just had this conversation. So a satchel is always going to be Elena's, even though a satchel is just an unglorified purse.
So there's lots of crossover.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of theaters have, before they condense, they discover that their props department and their costumes department has redundant storage. So the props department will have a whole bunch of umbrellas and parasols and purses and fans, and costumes will also have all of those same things, which means when you need to pull one, you have to look in two separate places.
Okay, so a hat. Who owns the hat?
Costumes, except for in Bohème, when all those hats are on that cart, and then they're Elena's.
That's right. The coolest thing about this podcast, I think, is that we are learning how intertwined we think of all these people as very separate. You have your props supervisor and your costume department and you're this and you're that, and they all work together all the time. Probably fight over a hat every now and then.
I don't think I've ever fought with Elena over a hat.
I love it.
I think in cases like that, what most of the time happens is the prop supervisor says face-to-face in an email, in a production meeting, whatever, hey, we need these things to be part of props. Do you have them that I can borrow from you? Because Elena is a very talented human being, but she is not a milliner, so it is not reasonable to expect her to be able to make all the hats that have to go on the cart in Bohème. Also, but she has so many things to do. Why have her use her time in that way?
Because she's making the cart that carries the hats. I love it.
And breakaway plates, because that show has a plate that has to break. So yeah, we will do a whole bunch of like, hey, Elena, do you have... I'm trying to think of something that Elena has that we would have to borrow, but often weapons cross both too. So like we'll have the belt, but she'll have the weapon. The holster could live in either place. So we have to do a lot of, well, how big is that gun or that sword? What size belt does it fit on?
Could you take us through just a general, there's obviously a lot of research involved. So if Arizona Opera comes to you and says, we're staging La Bohème, what is your process from start to finish to get La Bohème? Say we're building it from scratch, right? We're not renting it.
Traditionally, I'd read through the script or libretto, make my own props list, and chat with the designer / director, depending, it depends on if we have from scratch there would be a designer, what they envision those things to be, and like super detailed, do they want it to be red, super detailed in each prop. I usually do try and get, if I purchase things, I try and get those things purchased right away. So I have time for them to come in the mail and know that that's happening. Then I start trying to figure out the big things, big items that need to be built, how that's gonna happen, if I need materials.
Do you typically have, if that's the case, say you need a bar, right? We did, I don't know, so like say you were building the Fellow Travelers bar. Are you building that, or are you again partnering with the carpenters that Arizona Opera has to help you?
That piece was big enough to be a scenic piece.
Gotcha. Okay, so here's another gray line. Size of pieces potentially turn into scenic versus props.
It might also depend on the company that you're
Okay.
working for. I worked with a company that had a props carpenter.
Okay.
So he built some really awesome things. So he might have built that.
That's awesome. Cool. So then you're figuring out you've ordered your pieces, you're figuring out your big pieces. You're either building them, potentially, have help, but I've seen Alanna do amazing things, so I'm sure she's building most herself. So then what? You're building them, and then what's your next step? Is it just you then put it on the stage and see what happens?
Getting either those items or rehearsal items into rehearsal.
Okay.
Everything, something for them for the first day of rehearsal. So they have something in their hand when they get to that scene. And as I finish things, then they go into rehearsal and I swap them out. Then I get notes from the stage managers or the director saying this needs to be changed or needs to be smaller.
Kathleen mentioned just a little bit ago. So do you ever have to, she alluded to plates breaking in Bohème. So do you ever have to make props? How do you deal with that? So if you've seen Bohème or our most recent production, the plate was actually thrown to the ground and broken. And that happens every night. Do you have 10 plates? How do you do something like that?
It depends. Well, there are options. There are breakaway companies.
Where saying that, if you throw the plate to the ground, it breaks in the same way or in a certain way each time. It's built to break.
In a safe
way.
Well, there are companies that make sugar glass, quote unquote. It's not made out of sugar. For like bottles, smashable bottles, smashable plates. In Riders, we have a breakaway lantern chimney. Was that we definitely had that in our first Riders. I think it got cut for our second
Riders. We took it out of
Riders.
the second one because it ended up.
We did it differently. We staged it all
Mm-hmm.
differently. But for our most recent Bohème, I took a couple plates that were ceramic plates, like thick ceramic plates, broke them lightly with a hammer in the center, and tacked them back together each night with hot glue. I had probably 6 or 10 plates, so we broke 2 a night. So I wanted to have lots of backups in case they started to like break into smaller and smaller pieces.
Right.
Yes, that was an interesting prop to work on. Kind of fun, kind of tedious every single night.
That's one of those things that you don't like when you're sitting in the audience. You're like, oh, a plate was smashed. But like, it doesn't go farther than that, when in reality Alanna's backstage hot gluing or gluing plates together and doing and it just, you don't even think about it.
Yeah, breaking stuff is sort of Alanna's version of blood.
Yeah.
For us, right? In that you don't think about it, it's not a big deal, but it is because it gets everywhere and you have to the same and continuity and
when in reality someone's hiding in the set with a ketchup bottle full of blood, spraying it on people. So that's Alanna backstage with plates.
Like literally in our production meetings during dress rehearsal week, while we were doing notes, she would sit and glue back together things if it needed to happen. And
that's awesome. So go ahead.
On Blood, I worked at companies that we had to slit the goat's throat every night, so we had a huge blood bag in there that we just used the fancy cling wrap. We had a huge blood bag and put that in there every night, and they would poke it.
They always want stuff to break and stuff to bleed.
Yep.
It's always a pain.
Makes things interesting. So do you only work in theater or do you work elsewhere? So like Alita in our last episode is an esthetician and does stuff outside. Do you specifically only work in theater or do your skills transfer to other things?
I don't just work in theater. I have worked locally with a couple companies that use the skills I have. Most of the couple that I've worked with mostly been like my painting skills, which aren't fine painting skills to any extent, but like I'm a clean painter. I worked with a company that basically built a set, two basically sets to go out to San Diego Comic-Con. I actually worked with Ryan, our head carpenter, on that also. We saw each other in the shop, but doing totally separate jobs. I also recently worked on like a Christmas light show in town, like a drive-through Christmas light show that I helped paint part of the set pieces on there, and like stapling chicken wire to stuff. And you know, I'm very diverse in my skills because you have to be as a props person.
I always feel like anytime I ask Alanna for anything, she can do it. Like, I just feel like she can do everything. Like, every skill, like, it's
Props,
really, really impressive.
Props people, really good props artisans have to know how to do, like, they have to be able to sew, they have to do mild carpentry, you have to be able to paint, you have to be able to do plastic work, because there's such a huge amount of things that are covered under the umbrella of props that if you can't do some of everything, you're not going to be able to be a really good props artisan.
I say this every single time that I just don't have any of these skills. So every time we talk about it, it really blows my mind. Like, something that I feel like is impossible, Alanna's like, sure, I can do that.
Yeah, the other thing that good props artisans have that I think people who aren't production people never ever think of this is they have to be super organized, because everyone's always like, oh, the show's really easy, it's just 5 characters, it's fine. And then the props list is 7 pages long because they move this one thing on and off, and they eat 3 times, and every single item on stage, even the edible ones, count as a prop. And so then Alanna has to have a list of all the things that are actually consumable, and some performers only eat certain things, so the food has to be safe for all of them. And oh, then, you know, this thing is only, it all takes place in one house, but there's 5 years difference, so the furniture all has to swap out. And the lists and notes and back and forth emails about every little thing.
So how do you manage that? So I'm a performer and I have a cigarette in one scene and then I carry a vase out. What are you doing backstage that tells me, where do I get this prop? Where do I put it? What do I do when I'm done with it? What is that process like?
There's always a prop, at least one prop table or a prop area that has a spot specific for each prop. So this performer always picks it up from the spot they're supposed to pick it up. If they have time, they put it back down in that same spot. If not, there's a section called dead props, or like a drop spot for the props. So they always know where to get it every single time.
So then Alanna, because you're taking care of vases and cigarettes and things like that for, you know, the show, is that going to be similar then to what we're going to be doing for Copper Queen? The film, does it entail very similar aspects to our theatrical productions for you?
Yes, I'd say yes. As far as when we're filming that running, I'll be working with stage management to reset things and put the bed, the sheets back together between takes and things like that. Change out the bedding. It will be similar to doing a stage play, but with all the pausing, that's going to be totally different. I think the resetting between takes is going to be
And the continuity.
yes, yeah. I'm going to have like eagle eyes on that set for continuity because I picked that up in movies anyway.
Right.
So that should be.
Oh, that's
I think
funny.
that'll be fun for me, but also I'll really want that to be good.
Is there anything that you have to think about differently when creating or acquiring props for film versus live on stage?
How perfect everything needs to be. Like even specifically, I just bought some replica coins, which may not like silver dollar coins, with correct year markings on them. So they were pre 1910, which they might not even be seen. They might only be in a bag. I'm not sure, but I don't want that to be that. Yeah, I don't.
2,000 quarter like in a bag on a show. Yeah, that's.
Which normally for us,
it wouldn't matter.
Bag of washers.
Right. That's what I was gonna say. Is that often we have big old washers inside of coin pouches on stage because it makes a good noise.
Yeah, that's so cool to me. It just, the more we talk to people about the difference between film and theater, the detail that is required. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily think about that either to have, I don't know the difference if it's a bag of coins or a bag of washers on stage, but on film, you're right. Like you could open that bag and everything is just so up close and personal.
Everything needs to be painted really well. Yeah, everything needs to look really good.
I didn't even think about the fact that if you do a take and they picked up a vase, that if they redo the take, the vase needs to be in the exact same spot because you never know which section of which take. Wow, that's going to be tough. But it'll be fun.
There are whole departments in movies that's their job. They're the continuity department, and that's all they do.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But in this case, it's you.
I'm going to wear many hats during Copper Queen, I feel.
Hats that Kathleen is providing as a costume prop.
So it sounds like you're looking forward to working on the film, which is good. But what else have you done that you really enjoyed doing that was really crazy or cool or weird or fun to do? And it doesn't have to necessarily be something that happened at Arizona Opera. It could just be anything that you did.
The most exciting thing I've done, probably because I was pretty proud of it at the time, I worked on an off-Broadway show the short time I was living in New York City. 6 months. I couldn't do any longer than that. I was a props master for a show called Sex Tips for Straight Women from a Gay Man, based off a book, the same title. That was really cool to be in New York City, to be propping a show, to be working with a designer. I was making props in my bedroom. That was like a big high for me, especially at that time in my life. I was just got to New York City, had been there for, I don't know, 2 months maybe, and got this job.
Is there that was like modern? So it was all sort of things that we experience all of the time in our lives, which have their own sort of appeal often to work with. But is there a specific like prop that you've done that was weird or fantastical or like a period piece that was really interesting because it's not something you come across it very often?
My answer to these questions is also from this show.
Oh, great.
It was a muscle scanner.
Like hospital-wise muscles?
It was supposed to be like a TSA style wand.
Okay.
That glowed.
Okay.
Glued, and also shot confetti out of it.
All right.
Okay. All right.
So I took a lightsaber apart and worked with someone with a CO2 cartridge, I think from the Blue Man Group. He might have been the one that made the Blue Man Group. CO2, confetti cannon. So put them all together in a PVC long kind of wand contraption, and it also had, that was fun because I got the sketch from the designer,
Right.
and knew what needed to happen to it, and
But had to figure out how to make it
happen. That was fun.
A muscle wand that glows and shoots confetti.
Yeah.
So not only are you acquiring pieces that exist, you are literally creating pieces that a designer was like, oh, great, I want it to do this, this, and this. And then you do it. That's so cool. I love it. That's awesome. So maybe this was it, but maybe not. What is a dream project for you? Is there something that you just like, and it could be, I mean, anything, like something that you just really want to do, your dream job or project to work on?
I would like to work in Europe.
Okay.
I think that would be a really cool way to get over to Europe.
Yeah.
So to work on a show there, or to do a short tour around Europe, I think that would be really fun and an interesting way to see the
country. Yeah. That's I mean, I guess that's a pro of freelancing, is that while it's hard because you don't necessarily have a home base, you are traveling and working around the country and the world for that matter. That's really neat. And maybe you just answered this one too, but if you could travel anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I'd like to go to Sicily, Italy.
Yeah.
I'm half Italian, so on my list of places to go, the first one is Sicily. I think that would be really cool.
We've asked you a lot about what you do here and what a prop supervisor is, but what do you like doing when you aren't at work?
I like to go to like street festivals and be outside, garden, like farmers markets. I like to cook, and go to music festivals.
Which
Yeah.
we'll hopefully be able to go back to
Yeah.
sooner rather than later, hopefully.
So, since you just mentioned the things that you like to do when you're not at work and where you'd like to go, that got me thinking, is there anyone that you want to work with or that you have worked with who you really enjoyed participating in the collaborative process?
I got to work with Julie Andrews.
That's really fun.
While I was at Goodspeed Musicals in Connecticut. She wrote a musical. I forget who wrote it. She and our daughter wrote a book called The Great American Mousical, which was put into a musical. So it was really cool to see her in rehearsals and when we were in the theater, and like it was surreal. And I also got to work with her and her ex-husband Tony Walton, who always worked together.
Yeah.
So he was very talented also. He did the costumes and the props. Everybody was very excited about
That's
that.
fun.
That's,
It's always fun that our jobs let us work with such great people sometimes.
I agree. What an experience too, to be able to share space with, you know, and learn from someone who's
The Great Mousical? Is that
the
what
Great
you
Mousical.
The Great American Mousical.
The Great American Mousical.
I love it. That's so
That's
cute.
cute.
I know I'm gonna need to look it up now.
So then, I think let's do our trivia before we finish up our episode. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay. Nobody's keeping score, Elena. There's no pressure. Don't
Wait, isn't someone actually keeping score?
Robert said he was. This is going to be the running thing. Is
It
every
is.
episode we're going to mention. Robert said he was going to keep score. We haven't followed up with him to see
We have not.
if he is or if he isn't keeping score.
But for everyone listening, we will share the answers to these trivia questions at the beginning.
The next episode.
Yep, at the beginning of our next episode.
All right. The golden idol from Raiders of the Lost Ark was also used in which two of the following? Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Guardians of the Galaxy, James Bond Casino Royale, or Spy Kids 2, The Island of Lost Dreams.
So two of those also used
four.
it. I never, ever know the answers.
I don't know what this thing looks like. I've never seen any of those movies.
It's cool. It's to describe.
I'm in the same boat.
It's probably like that's about 10 inches tall, and it's gold, and it's got a big round head, and it's got like this weird teethy grimace, and it's actually a fertility idol. So imagine, if you will, then what the bottom half of this thing looks like. They used it in Riders of the Lost Ark, and it lived in a prop house. So movies often have repeated props, right?
Yep,
and so it also has been in.
I'm going to guess Guardians of the Galaxy and Spy Kids 2.
Is that the second and the fourth one on the list?
Yes.
Because I forgot. I was going to pick that. Okay, so then I'm going to
still
change
can.
mine
You still can.
to the second one and the third one.
Guardians of the Galaxy and James Bond.
Casino Royale.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So we've got a true and a false.
Okay.
All right. The boot that Charlie Chaplin eats in The Gold Rush was made of what? Licorice, jerky, or marzipan? It wasn't real leather because he did actually eat it in all of the takes.
I feel like jerky maybe looks like leather the most. But I feel like marzipan, you can like make bunnies out of. Like it's like very like adaptable.
I was going to say marzipan because I think it has less texture than the other two. It can have texture if you want it, but like jerky's pretty textury. Yes, leather does too, but I feel like jerky's more textural.
I'm going to go with marzipan.
You changed
Our
it?
props, yes.
You were convinced?
I was convinced.
Okay, 2 marzipans.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Alanna, and sharing what you do here at Arizona Opera. It's so great to have this kind of behind-the-scenes access. And thank you.
I was glad I got to share my experiences.
Yeah.
Awesome. So next time you come to a show, now you know
All of those things.
all
are
of the
on stage.
all of the secrets
Yeah.
behind the stage.
Most
Poor
of it is
Alanna
a prop.
had to find them.
Yep.
Had to bring out 75 different chair options
Yeah.
for the director to look at and
Yeah.
decide which one they wanted. That happens.
Yeah, I bet it does. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. On our next episode, we will be joined by Alice Fredrickson, costume designer for the Copper Queen. We'll be releasing a new behind-the-scenes podcast every month, so make sure you check our website, azopera.org. Follow us where?
Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you should join our email list so you can receive notifications about all of our upcoming events that you don't want to miss.
Arizona Opera Behind the Scenes is made possible by our lead digital sponsors for the 2021 season, Ron and Kay McDougall. This program is also part of the Arizona Opera Next Gen initiative that encompasses a wide variety of programs that go beyond the opera stage to develop the next generation of opera artists, audiences, and philanthropists. To learn more about the programs that are part of Arizona Opera Next Gen, please visit azopera.org and click Next Gen Initiative. These programs are made possible through the support of Karen Fruin, Roma Witkoff, Jeanette J. Siegel, the Valentine Family Foundation, APS, and Jody Pelusi. This podcast is produced by its hosts, with editing and music composition by Sean Mallow.